Hello, everybody. The Nameless Narcissist here once again. The simple man diagnosed with NPD, giving you the facts on narcissistic personality disorder and things that go on in my head. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. But keep in mind, I can only speak to my own experiences and the research that I read. So, as most of you know, I have a video detailing my childhood, which kind of gives you a good impression of how I ended up a narcissist myself, right? But I feel like I neglect something very important in that video. I'm kind of being a hypocrite by almost dehumanizing people who did hurt me and gave me a pretty damn rough childhood, but that had issues and trauma of their own. And I feel like that's kind of disingenuous for me to do, to ignore the kind of intergenerational trauma that leads up to somebody like me. Especially given the fact that, like, you know, it's not like they woke up one day and was like, I'm going to go make a narcissist. I mean, they did, but they didn't. It wasn't like an active choice on their part. So I'm going to detail to you guys my extended family and the wonderful stories that I have in store for that. So I'm going to start with my great-grandparents on my dad's side, my dad's mom's side. They actually lived a long time. I actually knew them, and which is surprising because two of my grandparents, I think three of my grandparents died before they did. But I don't know a whole bunch about them. I know that they were on and off a lot in terms of like their marriage, and that my uncle, one of their sons, my Uncle John, I know that he said that like they'd be accused of not like loving the dad all the time, and like things like once there was this big fight and the dad went around and broke all the lamps in the house. But it ended up being a good day, don't worry, because they made up, got ice cream, and went and bought new lamps. So, and apparently that was a good memory of his. So that kind of indicates that there was some stuff going on. I just don't know any details, basically. Anyways, they had three kids. One was Susan. Susan is my great aunt, and she died of a medication overdose. We don't know if it was a suicide or just drug abuse. It's very debated. There is my Uncle John, who had three kids, and we'll come back to him. Then there's my Grandma Barb. John had three kids. The first one was, his oldest was Kyle, I want to say. I forget his name. He died when I was really young. He was in his 20s when he died of a heroin overdose. When they found him, he was like half eaten by a pit bull. It was nasty. And they had an open casket. Like, I was like, what the fuck is wrong with you people? After that, my Uncle John actually bought a gun to shoot himself, but never ended up going through with it, which was that was about to say sound really bad, which it's unfortunate that he bought it, because then his youngest son ended up developing schizophrenia and like went like absolutely crazy. They tried to get him to psychiatric hospitals. He kept getting like, they were just not treating him good, stuff like that. They weren't getting him on the right medication. He was on a bunch of drugs, and they eventually they got him to calm down and got him to agree to go to rehab and all this other stuff. And like, he's finally home after being missing for so long, and as they're making dinner, he finds that gun and, does the deed. I know these things because my Uncle John, when I was 20, very much trauma dumped I knew they died like that, but he trauma dumped a lot. He was looking for me for emotional support. I was like, dude. Apparently he wrote Donald Trump personally asking for better mental health services in the United States. Why am I laughing? I am terrible. I apologize. Anyway, so then there's my Grandma Barb. She met my grandpa when her fiance was deployed in Vietnam, and she left that man for my grandpa. My grandma was very troubled, and I think she was actually diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. Some examples of the kind of stuff that she would do is she would occasionally get into fights with my Aunt Susan, and they'd be like wrestling and shit. And this one time, my aunt gets my grandma into this headlock, and like my grandma's screwed. She can't get out of it. So they're in the kitchen, and she reaches over to the counter and stabs my aunt in the back. And I'm like, go grandma. And I like, okay, there's a lot of terrible stories about my grandma, but she was like honestly a really kind-hearted woman. She like loved me. And like I was like really attached to her before she died. She died of lung cancer. which I have a lot of mixed feelings about because like I remember I was like a pyromaniac when I was a kid, so I would like ask her to smoke because I wanted to see the cigarette burn. And so given that she died of lung cancer is makes me feel kind of weird. And I remember my mom would be like, "Oh no, don't smoke," but then she would do it because she wanted to like my grandma would never say no to me. She never said no to me. There's this funny story where like apparently when I was born, like I was in a crib, my grandma came with a picture of herself and like a framed photo and puts it in my crib and says, "That's your best grandma ever," which I find hilarious. I would do that. I would do that. Yeah, and like there's a lot of stories about how she would, like whenever she would drink, she would get very, very violent. Like I was once detailed a story about, my dad never told me any of these things, but I heard it from other portions of the family, where like my grandma would get drunk and my grandpa would have to like get my dad and run into like the bathroom and like hide them in there, while my grandma would be like stabbing, like screaming, stabbing through the door with a butcher knife, just like The Shining style, right? My grandpa, he's an alcoholic. He didn't, like, I've never seen him sober, but, like, there's not much else to be, there's, like, he doesn't have anything particularly crazy about him. He did have, his cousins, though, were pretty nuts. I'm going to just use one as an example, because this is my dad's cousin. Like, apparently this dude was like weird. He was like super aggressive. He's been arrested multiple times. Like they're all like trailer trash and stuff like that. Like my dad told me stories about how like he was in like my dad, he's like a kid. He's like 11 or something like that. And this guy who's my dad's cousin or uncle or something like that, who's like a lot older than him, has like this girl over and like he's like, the dude is, as like my grandpa and him are getting wasted and my dad's just there, how he's like trying to lift up this girl's shirt that he's with. It's like, show me your tits, and like trying to like grab her and stuff, like right in front of my dad. And just like really weird stuff like that. They were like really like just kind of vulgar people. Then anyway, so they had two kids. They had my uncle who, he must be a schizoid or something, because he's never really dated. He just likes playing video games, and he's a veterinarian, so he's cool. Then there's my dad, and like, yeah, my dad had like always had really bad substance abuse problems. I'm pretty sure he started drinking when he was like 12, because my grandparents would throw like these ragers and stuff like that, and like just let him get drunk. Not much else to say about that. Yeah, my dad didn't have a great childhood. Then let's go to my mom's side. So my mom was born to, obviously, my grandpa and my grandma, who my sister is actually named after my grandma. And this side of the family is weird, like really, really weird. So they were married. I'm pretty sure this grandpa was actually like a low-key narcissist. He just like was very emotionally cold, and like he was surprisingly not angry, but he would like never compete unless it was things that he was absolutely good in. He was easily bored. He had a catchphrase that I steal nowadays, where somebody would be like, "Oh, nobody's perfect," and he would say, "Yeah, there's not very many of us left." Like stuff like just little stories I've heard, because he didn't really care about his grandkids or anything like that. Like he was just very indifferent. And like my mom would be like, "Oh, like," she's like, "all I ask is that you like call me on my birthday," and my grandpa would be like, "Well, that's just not me." I'm like, "Fucking based, fair enough." And he was married to my grandma, who was like a huge people pleaser. And she beat the crap out of my mom. Like, whew. It was funny because it was like a very kind-hearted woman, but she would just like, she would get upset over something that was happening to, in like her marriage, and she would like blame my mom and be like, "Do you want your dad to start drinking again?" and like stuff like that. And like, if anything did not please my grandpa, it'd be she would take it out on my mom, which was interesting. And apparently once my mom asked she had this boyfriend who was drinking a lot, and she was talking to my grandma about it, being like, "Hey, I don't know what to do about this. His drinking is like really intense. I'm not comfortable with it." And she looks at my mom and, like, in the most genuine way, just says, well, have you considered what you're doing to make him drink? And that's just kind of the mindset that she had. Very, again, very, like, codependent, people-pleasing sort of attitude. But, and apparently, but, like, some funny things that she would do, though, is that, like, my grandpa would, like, drive home drunk and stuff. And, like, he'd park and he would go inside and go to bed. And while he was sleeping, my grandma would go outside and repark the car to make it look like he was just at this, like, horrible angle. So, to freak him out and stuff like that, because he did get a few DUIs. Anyways, but so they had my mom, and then they had my other uncle, who he's, I'm not even sure if I should even, like, say his name and stuff like that, but this guy's interesting. He was married to this one girl, and he was, like, a huge drug addict. He would take my mom to, like, parties when she was, like, 12 and, like, get her high, and was, like, selling weed and stuff like that, and things harder than weed. But he became clean and became a born-again Christian, which was interesting. He had a daughter with his first wife. My memory on this is a little iffy. He had a daughter with his first wife, who that wife left him, took the kid, and, like, they were, like, in contact, and he was still allowed to see her kid, but she started dating some other guy, and this other guy was like, no, you're never seeing this kid again. And he just didn't fight for her, just went back home to Ohio, because they were in Colorado. And then my uncle and my grandpa were drinking at a bar one day, and it was really weird because the person who my uncle ended up marrying dated my grandpa, and, like, would say really weird things about my grandpa, like, even to this day, like, because my grandpa died, and now now this girl's married to my uncle, and apparently, if you ask her about my grandpa, she'll be like, oh, he waited for me, like, he waited to die for me. Because fucking, like, apparently she visited him shortly before, like, he passed away or something like that. And it's just really weird. I don't know. It's like intergenerational incest or whatever. Then, anyways, Dean had 2 other kids. God, I guess I'm just saying his name now. Whatever. Who, one of them got into has a really controlling wife, got into a car accident. He's completely paralyzed now. Can't really do much of anything. And his wife is so controlling that he literally can't even see anybody. So, no idea what's up with him. And the last person in my family who this video was just inspired by was my other cousin, who, last I heard, and this was like a while back, had a warrant out for his arrest and was, like, basically off the grid. And he'd been missing for years. And I just got a call today, and apparently they found his body a year ago, and only today did they actually identify it. He was shot in a homicide because he was dealing crystal meth and stuff like that. So yeah, makes you think. Because it's like, when it comes to, like, mental illness and intergenerational trauma and stuff like that, it's so easy to blame the abusers, right? And I think a lot of the time that is necessary, but you do have to take a step back for your healing and recognize that there's a lot greater things at play here. It's not just 2 people got together and were terrible together. Well, I mean, this can happen, but, like, and made terrible children. It's just that, I don't know, you look at it like this, and it looks like there was, like, barely a chance for anybody from the get-go, you know? Which isn't an excuse, you know? Like, just because I didn't have a chance not to be messed up in the head doesn't mean that I should, like, become complacent and allow it to continue. And that's one of the reasons that, like, I wonder if I'm ever going to have kids. I probably won't, because the chances of me passing on this crap are pretty high. Oh, and actually, wait, happy story real quick. I forgot. My one uncle on my dad's side, he does have one son who's still alive, and he is out west selling tie-dye t-shirts. So he's doing pretty good. He's just kind of like a hippie guy. But yeah, that's all I really know about. Damn, I should have started a death pool with my family. My God. But yeah, and I don't think any of them died of natural causes either. Yeah. Oh well. Anyways, hope you all have a good day. Take your fucking meds, please.